So let's start. Yes, thank you, Jack. Let's start. Let's start our class today. Very good. Wonderful. We are here together. So nice. I feel so happy we are being able to be here together online and you guys at the center. So grateful for you to be making this effort. We used to say that for people in the past to have access to these incredible teachings, people used to have to walk for weeks, months to have access. Nowadays we just turn on the TV or the computer and we can have a little bit of blah blah blah. So it's very important and very nice of you to make this little extra effort to go to the center, because the center is a special place and then there's a special energy over there. So the more you go, the more we can kind of like sink in that energy at the center. So that's very, very, very good. And of course, we come together. You guys bond, you guys talk, you guys eat, you guys have tea, coffee, and that is very important as well. Okay, so thank you so much for that. So to make sure that we use this time wisely, we need to make sure that our motivation, our intention is beneficial, right? And in order for an intention to be beneficial or not, for it to be Dharma, Buddha Dharma, you know, and especially a dharma that wants to not only think about oneself alone, but a dharma that wants to help others, we need to generate an intention that is based on the most supreme mind, the mind that is a completely revolutionary mind, a mind that nobody has ever thought about it. But actually Buddha like came up by his own observations and realized that the mind that thinks about helping others is the mind that brings happiness. But not only the mind that wants to help others in a way that is just about this life or about making people comfortable or just having food and all of these things, but especially the mind that wants to bring them to the enlightened state you know but the mind of enlightened state, for that we need to understand what is it, what is this mind of enlightenment. And this mind of enlightenment is the mind that the Buddha woke up to. He completely observed his own mind, and he realized the nature of his own mind. That's what it is. That's what waking up to. You wake up to the nature of your own mind. Because right now, the problem, the cause, the principal cause of our suffering, the main cause, the root cause of all of our suffering is a misconception of the way our minds work and the way our minds exist. And because, this misconception happens, everything else, all of the other drama, Brazilian soap opera, comes from this wrong view. Because we have wrong view, believing that things exist in a certain way, and the way things exist and the way that they appear to our minds, the way they are interacted with our minds, the way they're experienced by our minds, is completely different. So that difference, it's what causes us to suffer. Okay? So we need to understand first what type of suffering actually, these, more than just understanding, what is the cause of the suffering. First, we need to recognize the suffering in itself. Because otherwise, if we don't recognize the suffering, even though I'm here talking about these things, talking about, the misconception, talking about how things exist and how things arise and appear to our minds and are experienced by our minds, and saying that there is a difference, if we don't understand the result of it, if we don't experience, or we don't have clarity, if we don't actually we realize the result of this problem in our own experiences, then we are not going to look for a way to solve that misconception, right? So that is why it's so important that we always start with that wish to make sure that we want to be free from suffering. We need to recognize suffering, and then once we recognize the state that we are in, we then want to find the causes for it, to make sure that we want to eliminate the causes, cessate, completely eliminate those causes, and therefore we want the recipe out of it, the recipe out of suffering. Okay? So that is why it is important for us to then start to understand that once we develop these, we start to understand that the reason why everybody is suffering around us, or the reason why there is so much pain and so much suffering in the world right now, it's not because people are bad, but because they are exactly like us, really completely misperceiving reality. So that is the real reason. And therefore, because of that, all of the other negative emotions, all of the habitual tendencies, and everything, and especially our self cherishing attitude comes up. So, therefore, that's the reason why we suffer. Okay? So, we need to do that. Okay, so that's why it's so important that we understand that when we are here together, we want to do anything to decrease these negative experiences, this suffering from arising. So that is why it's important that what we use, what we are hearing here, what we are discussing, whatever questions we're going to ask, it needs to come with that intention to cut that suffering, to cut the causes of suffering. And especially if we can cut that misconception, that misunderstanding of reality. But for that, we need to have wisdom, right? Because otherwise we don't know what is the misconception, we don't even know what is the wrong view, we don't even know what we are talking about, therefore we cannot ask the right questions. So therefore we need to develop wisdom. Okay, and the more we develop wisdom, the more we start to buy it's an incredible experience of just seeing that oh, I understand why people are suffering. Therefore authentic compassion starts to arise. It's no more that stupid compassion that I talk about of like, oh yes, I need to be a good person, I need to be a good Christian, a good monk, a good, things like that. Not like this, not a stupid kind of like I have to. I don't have to do anything, but I understand the cause and I understand where it comes from, and I want to. I want to develop my mind so I can help them to be free from suffering. Very different than I have to and I want to, right? I think we all know, the moment that we start to actually grow up, that we start to be mature, is the moment that we don't need to actually, like clean our bedroom, but we want to have a bedroom that is clean, right? That I think it is a big mark in our lives, is that I don't have anymore to clean my room because my mommy or my daddy or whatever is telling me, but because I want to have it. So that is the biggest difference. It's not because I have to help others, but I want to help others because I understand my own suffering and I can see that they are suffering exactly because of the same causes, right? So therefore, whatever we're going to listen, whatever we're going to hear here doesn't become anymore just about me, about helping me to have a better life, to be a little bit more, relax, just drinking, whatever, like a coconut water by Ocean Drive or whatever it is, that place, over there in Florida, the beach, like not like that. It's just actually we start to check that if I develop myself and if I use this blah 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 that Kalden is saying and I can use it and really bring it to my own experience and to my own life, I am able to share and to transform myself, and therefore instead of harming others, I am able to help them. Okay? By developing that inner wisdom within myself. So that is what it is about, right? That's exactly the Buddhist path. That is why we call it is an inner path, because we do it inside first, and then the manifestation is a result. But if we think about it, the world is exactly the same, right? The world is exactly the same. Everything is a result of our inner world. There is only war because we don't have peace within ourselves. There is only problems, economical problems, because there is grasping. There is what is the word for? There is a lot of attachment, but what is the name of the word?
Greed.
Greed, yes, a lot of greed in the world. So that is why, that is the reason why we say the Dalai Lama said that, a long time ago, and people don't still understand, but there can only have peace in the world outside if there is peace within oneself. So that is why what we are doing here. We are peace warriors. We are warriors of peace. That's what we are. We are trying to develop, and create that kind of like, armor, and that those tools, those kind of like, we're gonna have our own kind of like inner tools so we can actually, well, I'm not gonna use the word fight, but we actually gonna subdue the negativities, subdue the causes of suffering, you know, so we can actually find happiness within ourselves and therefore be able to find and help and find ways, skillful ways, wise ways to help others so they can also find the same within themselves. Because we don't change anyone, we don't fix anyone, we don't actually do anything in a kind of like absolute level. Relatively, yes, relatively we can help, we can give food, we can give shelter, we can say things, we can, do many things. But in the end of the day, is the person who has to do their job of change, of transformation. So don't forget that, okay? That is very useful for not following into stupid compassion and thinking that we can save others, to become the fixers, okay? The fixer of anything. So, in order to help us to really guide our minds into this, we today, because I'm a very good monk, we're gonna do prayers today, aspirational prayers. Okay? So we don't forget that because aspirational prayers are very important, very, very important for us to remember, right? To remember to open our hearts, to really expand our hearts in order to think about others. Because the more we think about others, the more this mind doesn't become obsessed with myself, and me. Me, myself, and I. That's what it is. It's kind of like it's just me, 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 me. So then these aspirational prayers they come as a counteract, as something that if you think about it, completely the opposite of what we see in the world. Nobody, if you haven't read a Dharma book today, if you haven't listened to any Dharma teachings today, everything that you heard, everything that you read was about increasing the self-cherishing, increasing, the mind of attachment, the mind of anger, the mind of confusion. That's what it is. So that's why we need to kind of like remind ourselves. So we use everything that is in our power so we can do that. Okay? So let's do that. Let's create that wish, within ourselves to really develop that mindset. So that's why we're gonna do these prayers. Is it there? Yeah, for you guys? Can you see it? Yeah? Okay. Cool. So let's have that in mind, really open our hearts for others and really going into the root of the issue is that we don't want only people to have comfy, fluffy comforts or, possessions or, just things like that. But we want them to have everlasting, peaceful inner happiness. That's what we want. And we want them to be completely free from suffering. Okay, so that's what we're gonna kind of like aim. So that's why we do the four immeasurable thoughts. Okay, so let's have that in mind. And while we say these words, let's not just say it, but really try to think how we can achieve that. Okay, so just take a moment to bring that intention and thinking that we are extremely fortunate that we have found these tools and that we really want to transform our lives. We really want to change. We really want to develop ourselves. So, therefore, we're going to do these aspirational prayers in order to increase that wish, to nourish that wish. So, the more we direct our minds, we create the causes for it, the more the result will come about. So with that, we can do the prayers. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And now remembering that we're going to do that by choosing an inner path, instead of taking refuge in all of external things, we're going to do it within ourselves. And we want to develop that wish, to achieve Buddhahood, to achieve enlightenment. Because as we said, is the mind that is free from all the sufferings and that has all of the perfection of all the qualities. Therefore, we are having all the tools and all the wisdom, all the power to actually benefit others. Benefit in the way that we know that we don't change them, we don't transform them ourselves, but we help them to develop themselves, right? So that is very important. And of course, if you have a teacher or if you have someone that it kind of like, for us to be able to do that, we need guidance, we need help, we need inspiration. So that's why, we go to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly as a way to help us to do that. So we can visualize, normally we visualize our teachers and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of us as a source of inspiration. And we realize and we visualize all the human beings, all the sentient beings around us to say, okay, I'm not doing just for myself, but I'm going to help all of these people around me so they can be free from suffering as well as myself. Okay? And we can do the prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Very good. So we reinforce that motivation, and it's a very special and important motivation for us to be doing what we're doing, which is to think about the first teachings of the Buddha, right? The Buddha, when he got enlightened, after he went over there and he sat down and he, meditated, and then he realized that he understood a few things that people haven't understood it yet. So therefore, he thought for the first time. So he thought the four truths that he saw. Truths in the way that he saw things in a way that we don't see it right now because our minds are confused. Our minds are completely creating stories, like Disney World movies. That's what we are doing, Hollywood movies. We're creating a lot of very funny movies in our minds and we believe it's true. And then we check with our friends and say, oh, wow, did you see that they said this to me and they did that? And the person said, no, they didn't say that. I thought that they were very kind to you, very nice. And you're like, no, wait a minute. I know exactly. They were definitely doing this to me. And so we kind of like, we become best directors of movies because we just create all of these funny movies in ourselves, but we don't see it. We are the ones creating. We believe it's an objective reality. An objective reality means that we think and we truly believe that we are all sharing the same idea, right? But actually, let's face it, not really like that. Because if it is true that the way we are experiencing things, everybody would need to experience the same way, right? And let's face it, it's not true. Not everybody likes chocolate. I know very crazy people in the world exist, and some of them don't like chocolate. Okay, so that is a proof that this is not absolute objective reality. Okay, the deliciousness of the chocolate. You know, even I know people don't like pad thai. I know, I understand. I can understand how people don't like pad thai and the curry. You know, best curry. So then that means that is an objective reality is not in the way that we are experiencing. Is not. It's a creation of our mind. So that's what the Buddha taught. The Buddha said, okay, if I start with understanding this, explaining this might be too much for people. So what I first need to do is to people to realize the state of mind that they are at. So they can see that whatever they are actually chasing as happiness, and that feeling of dissatisfaction, that feeling that there is always something missing, that feeling that is like, oh, wait a minute, but it's so nice, but I'm in this beautiful place, like Bob. The other day Bob went to Hawaii. So Bob was there in Hawaii having the time of his life, everything okay, but then started raining, and then he became very angry. No, Bob is never gonna do that. So but that is the problem. We start to kind of like create these stories in our mind about like, oh yes, and then we have everything external, everything in our lives, everything is okay. We have the partner, we have the place, we have the food, we have everything that our senses want, the nice music, the soft touch of the skin, in the fluffy sand and the water. Wow, everything's gonna be amazing, right? We think like this. But then what happens? Even though we have everything, there is something in there that is a little bit thinking, but there's something missing. Something is missing, right? There is something that is not allowing us to feel completely at peace, at ease. Why? Because guess what? We already start to suffer in advance because that amazing holiday is going to finish, right? And we're already thinking about the day that we need to go back to the office or back to work. And we already start to suffer in advance by something that we're going to kind of like have to meet. Or maybe, oh no, and then this is going to happen and then that. And we start to kind of like create scenarios and experiences of suffering already for ourselves, even though the sense pleasures, all there, check. Nice food, nice smell, nice taste, nice touch, nice sights, nice music, everything's there, but the feeling of dissatisfaction is still there. So that is why the Buddha talked about the first truth. And as I like to say, he had a very hard work because he was trying to talk to us. He had a difficult task to say to us, look, I know you don't want to hear that. I know you don't want to kind of like be aware of it. However, the way we are living our lives right now, in reality, you know it's not in the way of pleasures and happiness that you think you have. Not only these, but the way we are looking for that happiness, and the way you're looking to be free from any type of discomfort, is actually bringing you more suffering, more discomfort, and is making you not find that happiness. So, Buddha had a difficult task, very difficult task. It was not easy. However, he was a strong, brave mind man, and especially not only that, he was very compassionate. So he wanted us to start understanding, right? Start understanding the prison we are at. And guess what? Who has the key? No, not Buddha. Buddha doesn't have the key. You. Because you put yourself there. So that is what the Buddha wanted to kind of like, make sure that we understand. Because if we don't understand, there's a story about how the people used to catch monkeys, in India. So what they used to do is that they used to take this cage with very like small little kind of like spaces between the kind of like, the like, I don't know how you say, the metals, like these, taka, 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 and they used to put a banana inside and close the gate. Okay? So then the little monkeys, they would go, and there was only space for them to put their little hands inside, and they would grab the banana. And then the moment that they grabbed the banana, the hunters would come. And then, because they were holding to the banana, they couldn't come out, take out their arms out of the thing, because the banana was blocking it. So they didn't realize that actually if they just dropped the banana, they could run away. But because they were so attached and they were just trying to get the banana with them, then the hunters would go and catch them. This is exactly how we are. Exactly like this. You know, we don't understand that is our clinging and we holding to the kind of like your attachments that we have. We are putting ourselves into a prison and making ourselves, kind of like capture, or how can I say, we are making ourselves completely, yes, captured by our negative emotions and our suffering, right? Exactly like that. We are exactly like this, right? We are a little bit, just not so smart than monkeys because we are doing the same. I don't know. I can see two new people in the room, so I welcome. But I'm sorry because I'm gonna offend all of you. Okay, so you guys don't worry sometimes. Okay. So what happens is that actually that is the problem that we need to realize, and that is why it's so hard, because we think that we know best and we think that we know how to deal and take care of ourselves. So if someone is coming and telling us, I don't think that what you're doing is working and I don't think it's making you actually be happy. So you don't want to hear that. So that is why it's hard for us to talk about the suffering, that we are at. So we can understand, because the moment we understand the suffering we are at, then we're going to want to look for a solution. Because if we don't understand, if we understand that it's like, oh, it's just because I didn't get the person, I didn't find the right person, I didn't find the right job, I didn't have enough money, I didn't find this. There's always that feeling of the next one, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. You guys recognize that? You understand what I'm talking about? That feeling. And then therefore we are just like drinking, salty water, trying to eliminate our thirst. Not, not possible. So that is why it's so important for us to understand. And that's why we started to talk about last week about the different types of suffering, right? And Buddha, and especially the Tibetans, they love divisions. So they divide it into 8 types, 6 types, 3 types, right? Remember we talked about that? Yes? And then last week we talked about the 8 types of suffering, and we talked about the 4 first ones. The suffering of birth. And I was talking about that today with my I don't know how we say these things. I'm very bad, even in Portuguese or any language. I don't know this, but the wife of my brother, right? And she was telling me, God, I was thinking about my baby, the baby, the niece, my niece. She was kind of like, she was already ready when she was 9 months. Like when before she left, she was already, and she was just there, tucking inside of the water, relaxed, no problem, being fed, everything okay. And then she comes into this crazy world, and this noise and all of these things and da da da. If you think about it, a lot of suffering in there, right? And then, so that's what we talk about, the suffering of birth. And then not only this, the moment we are we born, we start to actually age, right? So then we have the problem of the suffering of aging, you know, that both Bob and Brian know very well because they're very old. They're getting old. So they know very well, the problems of aging, And then not only aging, sometimes is not so bad, like both Bob and Brian, very fit, very strong guys and all of that. But sometimes we get sick, illness, sickness is part of our life. So then we have the suffering of sickness, of getting sick, ill, right? And some of these sickness can kill us, right? Sometimes that's what happens. We get sick and we die, and death is the other type of suffering. That's why we don't talk about it, because we don't want to know what happens. We don't want to prepare ourselves for that suffering, what it is. Death, I don't want to talk about it, la, 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 like this when someone talks about death, right? Because we don't want. But the moment we are born, the moment we are born, the first thing, the only sure thing that we know the moment we are born is that we're going to die. Isn't it? The only thing. I have no idea what's going to happen with my life the moment I'm born, but the only thing I know what's going to happen is that I'm going to die. Okay? Not only me, everything. From the mosquito who lives for a day, for a turtle who lives for 150 years, from the alligators at in Everglades, that lives for 300 years. I don't know. They're all gonna die eventually. Okay, so that were the first four types of suffering. But then the Buddha started to become a little bit more subtle, and he say, you know what? One of the most difficult sufferings that we have and we don't like, we don't enjoy, and we try to fight as much as possible is the suffering from the separation, as we say, okay? Being separated from things that we like, from pleasant things. Hmm? Separation from our family members, from our close friends, right? From places, from food. We don't like this. It's a suffering. It's already, we have that feeling. Even sometimes when we go away, there's when people kind of like go to, there was a TV program in Brazil long time ago that was this woman. She would be kind of like recording people meeting and going away, and at airports. And when people would meet, they would be very happy, because long time no see, it's so nice, and then they would come together. But the moment that they would depart, wow, so much suffering, right? Because they don't know when they're gonna see that friend again, or their family member, or that lover. They don't know that. So much suffering from the being separated from that pleasant experience that we have. Right? Do you understand that? It's like me when I get separated from pad thai and all of the delicious food over there. Very, very sad. I get very sad because I'm a foodie, so I get sad. So that's how it is. So that is the unpleasant, right? So this is what the separation from the pleasant things that we have, right? Then, not only this, we have the confrontation or the encounter with things that are unpleasant. Remember, I say that quite a lot. Nobody woke up here today, and said, I hope I can suffer a lot. I hope I can suffer a lot. Nobody said that, right? Even the craziest person, even the most kind of like, deluded, crazy, or addicted, like under the influence of high drugs. No, nobody's saying that. However, right? We are really trying to avoid as well any type of unpleasant situations. Even so that we do things strongly with our body and our mind and our speech in order to avoid those unpleasant situations. However, guess what? The Buddha said, it's part of life. We're going to encounter unpleasant situations. So it's better to have tools to deal with them than actually trying to avoid them, right? So there was a beautiful expression. It wasn't used directly here, but in other situation that says, what is easier? It is easier to, because imagine at that time of the Buddha, there was not kind of like streets, so everything was just like dirty roads and all of that. And they used to say, what is it easier to actually put leather, because leather is soft, in the entire roads and earth, so you can go barefoot very smoothly, or is it easier for you to just put leather under your feet, so you know how to deal with the problems you're going to encounter? So that means that what we actually have control, what we can do, is to deal with the situations that we encounter ourselves. So therefore, we need to take care of our own mind and having ways to deal with these unpleasant situations that eventually end, not only possibly, but we will encounter, right, in our lives. Not trying to avoid them, not trying to pretend that they are not going to happen and evade them, kind of like try to run away from them as we do, because they're going to catch up with us. One way or another, at some point, unpleasant situations happen. Okay? And then another thing that we actually happen to us is that not achieving what we actually desire, right? We have all of these hopes, all of these expectations, all of these desires, And we really put, so much. It's like now, there was a friend of mine, she's very kind because she says, she's like, oh, yo, I wish I could have a lot of money so I can help you, and give you money so you can do all your projects and help all of these projects that I do, So she was telling about that. She said, I'm going to play the lottery, you know? And I said, oh, very good. She says, if I win the lottery, I give everything to you. And I said, wow, 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 that's very kind. But then she started to take all of these things that she wanted to do with the lottery, right? That's like us. We start to kind of like create all of these hopes and ideas and kind of like, oh, I wish that. Oh, yeah, and then I wish this. Oh, I wish that. I wish this. Oh, And then we start to create all of these kind of like completely crazy ideas, right? And we don't create the causes for them to happen. Why? Because then we don't go and we forget to buy the ticket for the lottery. So then we cannot win the lottery, right? How can we win the lottery if we don't buy the ticket? So this is exactly what we do. We actually create a lot of ideas and expectations and desires and fulfillments, but we don't create the causes for it. We don't look into the right causes, how we can actually achieve those things. So that is one of the main sources of our suffering, according to the Buddhist path, according to the Buddhist world. Okay? And then there is one that I'm gonna kind of like talk in a certain way, but then after a few, maybe in 2 weeks, I'm gonna talk a little bit more. But we say that as long as we are born with with a mind that is completely creating and projecting wrong ideas and movies and kind of like wrong views and incorrect way of understanding life, as long as we do that, we will suffer. We will suffer. Doesn't matter. Why? Because as it's a mathematical situation or exercise. If we have the source of our idea of happiness being something that do not exist, and we have reality, so whatever it is, these that we are projecting can never happen in the way that we are projecting, and there is reality. That gap will make us suffer either more or less. So as long as we are doing that projection to these completely deluded, crazy ways of how things exist, we're going to suffer. So that means that as long as that mindset is there, there is suffering. Makes sense? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Thumbs up, thumbs down. So.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Our new friends, okay over there? Yes?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so that is very important because then we start to understand. Okay? And then we start to go a little bit deeper, let's say, into the types of suffering. Because remember, we talked about a few months ago about the possibility that the Buddhist proposal of rebirth. Remember, I was very mean and I made you watch Netflix and watch this thing about the movies, the documentary about the rebirth. Remember about that? It was called the Surviving Death. Yes. So if you
Yes.
haven't watched it, our new friends, you can watch that. Surviving Death is very nice. It's on Netflix. As you look that you guys don't watch Netflix, so I know I'm gonna have to make you do that. So so you guys do that. So you just watch Surviving Death, especially episode 6, if you can. Huh? And then over there's a way that the kind of the scientists, the science people and scientists, he kind of like tried to prove the existence of future lives. Okay, so he says that there is children that can remember their hello dear welcome. That we can kind of like check the possibility of remembering past lives. So that is very interesting. I don't know if if you guys can understand that, but there is many ways. So the Buddhist way to see it is that to check, think about it when we are going to sleep. Before we go to sleep, we just kind of like we are watching a like horror movie, and then we go and we have bad dreams, and then we wake up and we said, oh wow, that was a very strange kind of like dreams I had. Where did they come from? Well, you were watching the movie. So that's exactly where it came from. So the idea of dying and being reborn in Buddhism is exactly the same, right? So if you think about it, I have now a niece, 2 months old, 2 months, little thing like this, 2 months. But she already has personality. She already has ways. She already has a way of looking and interacting and things like that. And you think, really? Like, she can't have learned that in 2 months, right? So you can see that probably there is just a continuity that came already from before. Hmm? So she just came, she passed away in the previous life, and now she's coming back in this life. We already continuity. So we hope that she was not watching horror movies in her previous life, so she kind of like she can have nice kind of like dreams or nice experiences in this life. But that's how it is. Why do we have personalities that we think that we are like this? Or if we have siblings, I have my brother is just 1 year difference from me, so we almost kind of like twins. If you think about it, just 1 year difference. I am a crazy monk, and he works with like on a kind of like a normal life. He has a daughter, he has all of that, so something different there. Same parents, same type of kind of like education, everything, same place, same thing. So there's definitely some accumulation, if we want to call, of kind of like past experiences that we bring in this life, right? So that is important, because when the Buddha, when these teachings about suffering, what we are talking about is that not only eradicating the suffering of this life, but being able to eradicate all the suffering in all our future lives, right? So that is important. Because right now, when we're going to talk about the six type of sufferings, we're going to talk about, let's say, the suffering that in all lives, it doesn't matter where we are reborn, it doesn't matter if we are reborn in this country or in another country, if we're reborn a woman, a man, if we're reborn in an animal, if we're reborn an ant or an insect, mosquito, or if we're reborn as a shark, or if you're reborn as a dog, if you're reborn, where's Margaret? As Joey, the dog, it doesn't matter. It's like everybody experiences the same type of suffering, especially these six ones that we're going to talk about. Okay? And the first suffering that we talk about is the suffering of indefinition. It means that nothing is definitive. Do you recognize, do you understand what that means? That is so special. This means that it's from a perspective of not only this life, okay, it's easy to see, right? That the suffering of impermanence, as we also can call it, that everything changes and everything is going to finish. That is the nature of things. Even the most solid thing that we are looking at, I don't know, think about it, something very solid. Yes, when I was traveling the first time, I arrived in Florida. I arrived in Miami because I didn't know Fort Lauderdale existed and there was a airport, so I went to Miami. And then Rebecca, very kindly, the director at the time, she came to pick me up, and then we were driving up from Miami all the way up to Deerfield. And then she showed me this big thing at I think it's in Fort Lauderdale, that there is like a hard rock cafe hotel thing like this that looks like a guitar, right? You know what I'm talking about? You guys know what I'm talking about? Yes?
The hard rock.
They're hard rock, like kind of thing. So if you look at these, you think, wow, this is forever. It's like it's gonna stay forever, right? It's gonna just like do not not really. Hmm? Actually, if we lay over there, if we live over there without doing any maintenance or anything like that, in hundreds of years, it's just going to start to fall apart. So nothing is definitive in this world. ever. Constructions, people, object, the weather, and guess what? Not even planet Earth or the sun, right? The scientists are already calculating when the sun is going to finish. Okay? Well, and now planet Earth, we are calculating, and it's not, I have to say that we have bad news because our calculation is becoming shorter and shorter how long the Earth is going to survive, right? But that proves that even things that look so concrete, so definite, so permanent, they are indefinite. They are indefinite. They are completely impermanent. Okay? So that is very important because this is the type of suffering that, because we don't understand that things are in this way, wow, the amount of suffering we create, the amount of times that we cling to permanence, that we cling to definitive, to the way that things should continue to be like this. And we don't need to think about like just like situations like that, external objects, external people, but just think about it. We meet someone, and we met someone in that very specific situation. Maybe, well, nowadays everybody finds people on Tinder or whatever things they are, right? So there's not so kind of like, but nowadays, but before you would go to a place and you would see someone, so you're like, oh, there's this beautiful kind of like atmosphere, there's something like that, and then we really grasp to that image of that person in that way, right? And then we make it permanent. We really believe, that that person is like that. And then we cling to that permanence and we think that that person should be like this. And then the circumstances change, everything changes, the person starts to move and to be completely different. And we start to think, oh, that person, fooled me because she or he was not like this, right? We start to think like this. So we cling to those permanents. We think that things should be like this. Or, for example, when we really, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be sad when people die, but when people die, we also don't want them. We kind of like become sometimes so desperate, but because we are clinging to permanence, right? Why most of us don't want to talk about death, or when we think about death, we become a little bit agitated, right? Because of permanence. We think we are permanent. We believe, everybody around here is gonna die, but not me, right? Or maybe not today, tomorrow. Okay, okay, we can think about that. Yes, okay, Calden. Yeah, and of course I talk about that, but I'm definitely gonna get home today. I'm definitely gonna watch some Netflix, and I'm already kind of like planning everything. I know I'm gonna survive. I don't know why you're saying that, because this permanence is just there. We're clinging to it, right? Therefore, when impermanence, which is reality, okay, because we just observed, not because Buddha was saying, but just our observation, our own observation, when reality kicks in, we suffer, right? When things become impermanent, when things change, when things don't become definite as we want, we suffer. So remember, I talked about the math problem, right? The math problem of projections and reality. So whenever reality kicks in, because we are living in these deluded, completely crazy ideas, we suffer. Yes? Makes sense what I'm saying? Do you guys understand why this is a type of suffering? And guess what? We bring that strong belief of permanence and definitiveness. I mean, inventing words. We bring that, we bring that in all our lives. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if we are a mosquito. Even the mosquito thinks he's gonna live forever. Okay? Even the dog, even the whale, the shark, even everybody. So we all think like this. Everybody thinks like that. So we bring that understanding with us again and again and again and again and again and again in our future lives, suffering again. So what we are talking about here is to think to be free from that suffering, not only in this life, but all my future lives, I need to understand that things are impermanent by nature. Okay? So that is what we need to develop. Because once we develop that understanding and we keep that understanding, that's it. We bring with us as well that correct view. Makes sense what I'm saying? Yes? We replace the wrong view to the correct view. We replace the wrong movie, for a correct understanding of reality. Okay? We don't need movies anymore. Okay? We're gonna stop watching Netflix. That's what we're gonna do in our own minds. Okay? Not only outside, but inside as well. So that's the idea. So the second type of suffering is the suffering of dissatisfaction. Hmm? And that is easy. That is kind of like, it doesn't matter what we do, we continue suffering again and again and again with that feeling of never being satisfied. We talked about today, right? That, I think, it is the biggest or the easiest way to kind of like realize, you know? But because think about it, I used to work in finance and I used to have a lot of rich people around me. And all of us nowadays believe that the reason why I'm suffering is because I'm poor. Even though I have money, I don't have enough money. I'm not rich enough, right? Most people think like this. We don't think like that because we are smart people. But sometimes we think like this. And then what happens? We see these really rich people and we go and we say, they are suffering even more. They are suffering even more because they have more problems, because they have different kind of like situations, because they have so many situations, so many problems. So it's not there. It's not there. Right? And then we think that this is like, oh, okay, so it's just because I don't have the right partner. And then we have the right partner, and then we still suffer. We still find ways to create problems. It's like, Brian and Sandra, they know each other, they are in love, there are many things like that. But Sandra makes Brian nuts, and Brian makes Sandra nuts sometimes. So, that is kind of like, even though we have the perfect person close to us, there is still that feeling of dissatisfaction that arises sometimes, right? Don't forget, these feelings, they are kind of like, I'm not saying they are there, they are kind of like sometimes dormant, okay, but they are there, the potential to kind of like arise is there, okay. So that is important, that we believe, we start to realize that. Remember, what the Buddha was trying to teach us is for us to wake up for these types of suffering so we cannot be fooled by them. Yes. So that dissatisfaction, that suffering of dissatisfaction, no matter what we do, no matter how many times, we just need more and 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 more. So that means that the happiness, the types of pleasures that we have in these kind of like, existence, the way we exist now, it's just never satisfying. Never. Okay? So that is important. That is important that we have that very strong in our minds. Because what we are actually calling happiness right now, it is those fleeting, temporary pleasures. We think that this is happiness. Hmm? So what do? We cling to them. We involve ourselves into stories. We create even more Brazilian soap opera, to kind of like achieve those things. And then we just suffer. That's what happens to us. Right? And then we create more suffering, more and more and more suffering, and then we never find it. And it doesn't matter. Even though, as I say, sometimes we find someone and we are in that kind of like honeymoon phase and everything's okay. So it feels that, oh no, Kalden has no ideas because he never found, the love of his life like me. I'm in love. I found the person in my life. He doesn't know. The Buddha didn't know about that. He has no idea about that, right? And then reality starts to slowly kick in. The more you spend time with that person, the more this person starts to get into your nerves. And the more you spend time with this person, the more you're going to the toilet and staying 2 hours in the toilet because you need some space for yourself. So that's when you start to actually realize that these situations, they are there. They are part of our experience. Okay? So that is very important that we recognize. That's why the Buddha said the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, needs to be recognized. Okay? We need to recognize it by what it is. Okay? And then, of course, we have the suffering of dying again and again and again. Think about it. If there is, a possibility of being reborn, if there is many lives, that means that we are experiencing the suffering of dying, not only in this life, but again, in all lives. That fear, that kind of like, worry about when or how we're going to die. Just again and again and again and again and again, right? Because of that mindset that we are seeing things in the wrong ways. So that's what we want to get rid of. That's what we want to be free of, right? So we don't need to be reborn again and again and again. Because that is another type of the sufferings. Is the fourth one is the being reborn, right? Remember we talk about the suffering of being born. So we talk about the suffering of being born again and again. So that is very important as well. Another type of suffering that we experience, and never finding that peace, because right now, what makes us, we're going to talk about it in a couple of weeks, what makes us be reborn is that mind, is what we call karma, right? Action, intention. Hmm? So if our intention is, I want to continue, I had all of these things that I had to do. I wanted to do this. I didn't find satisfaction. I need to find satisfaction. And then I need to be, I need to find satisfaction. So I cling to that. So then I get reborn again, to find satisfaction. And guess what? And then we find again, and then we go through the same thing. We go to middle school, we go to kindergarten, middle school, high school, and then this, and then that, and then we go to and all of this suffering again, and then again, and then again. I don't know you guys, but I don't want to go to middle school and high school again. I'm done, gone, gone. This life is gone, and I don't want to have to go again. Okay, so that is kind of like something that really kind of like, I know very bad motivation, but that's my motivation. I'm like, I was so bored at school that I don't want to have to go there back again. So that's what I feel about it. I say, may I be able to choose where I'm going to be reborn. That's the idea of this, the idea of understanding suffering and being free from it, because then I want to choose where I want to be reborn. And I can go through the sufferings of kindergarten, of middle school and high school, because I want to help others. So my motivation is completely different, you know completely different. I still go through this kind of like different experiences, but if my wish is to help others, then these experiences become nice. It's like, yes, I can go to middle school and high school and I can help all the bullies, all the crazy people, all of that, to kind of like be happy. So then it's totally different intention. Then my life becomes meaningful, purposeful. There's a purpose. So then it's different. Makes sense what I'm saying? Does it make sense? Yes. My new friends over there, they are the thermometer. They are kind of like, if it makes sense for them, then it should make sense to all of you, because you've been hearing blah 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 for a long time. Okay, so you should be. So that is important. Yeah, Bob has a question. I was already kind of like getting worried. I've been talking for an hour, and I was like, what is going on that nobody's saying, asking a question, and Bob is not asking a question? Tell me, dear.
The idea of not repeating
Mm-hmm.
the same experience you have
Mm-hmm.
and have had in grade school, middle school, and high school,
Mm-hmm.
is that a reality?
What we are talking about here is the type of suffering of believing that things are permanent, that things are kind of like definite and things like that, right? So being able to be free from that is when you achieve the correct view of how things are, even though you are experiencing life as it feels normal. So that means kindergarten, middle school, high school, you don't have those wrong views in your mind. Therefore, there's no suffering.
So you're
That is
saying
the idea.
you can have rebirth with
Free.
with right views and not wrong views.
Yes. That is what a bodhisattva and a Buddha can do.
Okay.
Right? That
Yeah.
is what we are trying to achieve. right? And that is very important, Bob, because we don't then think that Buddha or becoming a Buddha or becoming a Bodhisattva or is something kind of like becoming a robot or a god, like, like, we are kind of like, not like this, just like a blood, kind of like, matter like this, and but just coming from that wisdom and really helping others, right? Is that potential that each of us we have of using our body, speech, and mind to only bring benefit. Because right now, the problem is that we are using our body, speech, and mind to create suffering for ourselves and others, right? Why? Because we're increasing these wrong views. We are kind of like, putting our ideas of attachment, of anger, of, this selfishness, right? Because right now, when we wake up, we just think about me, myself, and I. If I woke up and it's like, oh, am I gonna have raisins with my porridge? Am I gonna have, like my coffee, half my half milk, half whatever it is that I never understood what the half is, but some kind of like, like these, and then we kind of like, oh no, but it needs to be in this thing, in this glass, in this, and then sugar, not this, and then you have that creamer, we kind of like, we are insane if you think about it, how crazy we are with kind of like just a couple of coffee, for God's sake, it's like we are kind of, because we are so obsessed with believing that those things will bring happiness, right? That if we don't have raisins, like our friend Jack, over there, you know, Jack starts to cry and get angry, or kind of like, oh, I don't have raisins. Where are my raisins? What did they do with my raisins? Kind of like we suffer because of that. Do you understand what I'm talking about? That is very important that we understand. So the reason why we have that potential is because those mental states, they are not a permanent part of our minds. They come because we believe in these, but they are not a permanent we use the word inherent. Inherent means they are not kind of like essential part of the mind. Therefore, we can be free of them. Therefore, we can still have rebirth, being reborn with the body and the mind, but being completely free from it. So then we just have fun, enjoy. And not only we don't just have fun and enjoy, but we don't create harm for others. And more important, as the Dalai Lama used to say so many times, because that is the real reason of Buddhism. The Buddhism will say, if you can, don't harm others. But if you can even more, help others, right? Because it's not enough just to not harm others. Let's face it, the world as it is right now is not enough just to stop harming others. It's more important that we actually develop ourselves, develop our skills, develop our intelligence, develop our body, our speech, so we can help others. And then we need to go back to the beginning of the class when we were doing our motivation, that helping others means that we are not wanting to change others, thinking that we are in a pedestal and we know what is best for others and we're gonna, change and go and fix others. Not like this. We want to help others by achieving a mental state of freedom from suffering and the causes of suffering, and we achieving a mental state full of love, compassion, and kindness, and patience, and and wisdom that is unconditional and unlimited. So if we do that, then we develop the tools, the necessary skills, so we can help others so they can develop that. We cannot develop for them. They need to develop that, right? That is very important. We don't help and fix anyone ultimately. We can help and fix relatively in a conventional kind of like short-term temporary way, but for them to be free from their sufferings, they need to do their job, right? But that also means that we start to look at others saying, everybody has the potential to become a Buddha. Everybody has the potential to actually eliminate their suffering. Even the worst person in our lives, that person that just hearing their names makes us itch of anger. You know what I mean? that kind of like person that just like, you know, I'm not even going to talk about politics because, but even the politicians that make us crazy, even them, whatever they are, whoever they are, even them, they also can become enlightened. They can also become a Buddha. So when we look in this way by understanding our own potential, everybody becomes, a potential Buddha, a Buddha to be, right? So then we start to develop that wish to help them, right? But the way to help them is like how I can help someone to become a Buddha if I don't become a Buddha myself, right? It's like a joke. It's like, okay, I'm going to start like a coaching people how to swim if I don't know how to swim. It's like a joke, right? So that is why we need to do it. We need to start with ourselves. Then we need to transform our minds. We need to look into these types of sufferings, recognize them, and make a choice. Because that was what the Buddha wanted. The Buddha wanted us to recognize it so we could make a choice and say, I don't want to suffer anymore. I want to be free from this suffering. Okay? So then, if I want to be free from this suffering, from these types of suffering, I need to find the causes for it. So that's why he thought the second noble truth, the causes of suffering, right? So the Buddha was a nice guy. He said, okay, he was a nice guy because he said, recognize the suffering, but don't worry. Just, yes, if you just recognize suffering, you're aware of all this suffering, then what? What do I do with that? Then recognize that they come because of a cause. And then you start to recognize the cause, right? The negative tendencies, the negative emotions, the negative habits, these wrong views, you start to recognize it. And then what? What do we do with that? Okay, but I recognize them. I understand them. I can see them, And then he said, there is a way to eliminate and cessate them completely. Completely. So then he says, okay, there is a cessation. Why? Because the mind is pure of them, right? And they are temporarily obscuring the mind. So if we cut the causes for them to come back, to arise, they are free. The mind, the purity, the beauty, the love, the compassion of the mind just arises, right? So then we finally say, okay, Buddha, I bought it. I bought the idea. Give me the recipe. Give me the thing, the red pill or the blue pill. And he says, no pill. You need to do the work. There is no such thing as enlightenment pill. There is only hard work, introspection, and meditation and learning and contemplating, and especially doing it with the intention to help yourself and others. That's it. Okay, we finished the teachings forever. You guys already know everything. Now go home and that's it. Okay, any other questions? Because we are getting to the end of the class today. Any other comments, or as my mom says, any questions, comments, or considerations? Because she likes to give considerations, to consider things. Normally, no? Okay, homework. Homework, you guys, the new people, they think that they come and then they just come, listen to blah, 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 and go home. No way, there's homework. Okay, homework is to try to observe, especially these out of these new sufferings that we talk about, the suffering of dissatisfaction and the suffering of permanence, of definitive, right? Means, do you recognize that in your life? Okay, do you recognize that you are clinging to things in a definitive, permanent way? Point one. And point two,
impermanence, no? Impermanence, no, Kendra?
Yeah,
no,
impermanence.
yeah,
Impermanence.
in permanent way. But do you, no. The question is, do you see things in a permanent way? First, you need to recognize. Don't forget. What we are trying to do is recognize how we are doing these things.
Unfortunately not, no?
Hmm?
Unfortunately not.
Unfortunately, we are not seeing things in an impermanent way. That's exactly. Unfortunately, we are seeing things in very permanent, fixed ways. That's why we really. That's why it's kind of like it is like that, and it has to be like this, and it stays like this forever, and then we suffer. So that's what we need to consider and try to see the subtleness of it, okay? Especially you guys that already been listening to these, Gina, Bob, you, Sharon, all of you, Esther, Alex, Margaret, you already listened to these long time. Our new friends, they just heard, so then maybe it's, kind of, but you guys try to see the subtleness of how these arises in your mind, huh? How you're clinging to permanence, okay? And then also especially the dissatisfaction, how you are never satisfied. Just recognize, just try to recognize. When you go to a restaurant, you order something, and then how the food is not maybe the same, or the coffee, or these, or and of course we have that sense of entitlement of like, but I paid for it, so I want to have what I want. But just notice, and you can still go and ask to change and ask for a hot coffee or whatever it is, but just notice, oh, I'm dissatisfied here. I can see, even though I have what I wanted, it's not exactly what I wanted, therefore I'm suffering. And even when you have it, check how it is slowly starting to be dissatisfaction. It's kind of like, the moment you're finishing the coffee, you're like, oh yes, I'm super good. But then there is already something else coming up in the mind that is like, oh, but now I need this, and now I need to do something else. And how is you're always jumping to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. Okay? Don't forget that. So that's homework. Okay? Because the more we use that in our daily lives, the easier it becomes for us to be free from this. Okay? So we do dedication as we finish. Dedication means that we are kind of like wanting to make sure that everything of this blah, blah, blah that we heard makes sense, and that it's not going to stay here, but we bring with us in our daily lives. So we dedicate that we use this knowledge, that understanding, that whatever wisdom that we can get from this experience. Wisdom is an experiential thing, so it needs to come from you, never comes from me. No, knowledge comes from outside. We can have like listen to knowledge, but wisdom comes from experience. Okay, so dedicate that this experience that you created of positive inputs, and then maybe you develop some insights, some tools today that you use it. You use it for what? For two things: to not harm others and to benefit others. Okay, don't forget that. Never, never, never. Then best gift to all the Buddhas and best gift for Kalden. Kalden becomes very happy if you do that. Okay? Don't forget that. So then we do that, and we only hear because due to the kindness of these teachers, incredible teachers that have going through so many sufferings and so many hardships, so they could embody those teachings, especially the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our teachers. So we pray for the long life of the Dalai Lama so he can continue, showing the path to us and being this beacon of light and peace and amazingness in the world, kindness. And for Lama Zopa Rinpoche to have a swift return, because we believe in reincarnation, and he's already back, he's already reincarnated somewhere in Nepal. And those that are coming to our pilgrimage in Nepal, we're going to go Rinpoche hunting. That's what we're going to do over there, okay? So we dedicate for that, for him to come back so we can now continue receiving his teachings, okay? And his wisdom, his knowledge, so we can develop our own inner wisdom, okay? And for the center to continue spreading, these incredible teachings, and people like you to be able to come and find a place of love, compassion, and kindness and wisdom. So this place to continue existing for long, 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 long time. So have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful day. Tomorrow, unfortunately, we don't have meditation because they changed my flight. So it's sort of my fault, but not my fault. But you can blame on me, blame on Kalden, no problem. But I see you on Thursday, okay, for our Lojong teachings. Thank you